They called her lucky, but the mountain winds cared nothing for luck. The ridgeline stretched in jagged silence, dawn spilling pale light across stone and frost. Sergeant Elena Vargas, call sign Falcon, pressed her body flat against the slope, cheek resting against the comb of her custom .338 Lapua rifle. Every breath condensed in the chill, controlled, measured, never wasted. Corporal Devin Brooks shifted beside her, eyes darting between his rangefinder and the valley below. He muttered numbers under his breath, recalculating the same distances again and again. His nerves betrayed him, hands twitching as if the mountains themselves unsettled him. Vargas remained still, eyes through the scope, as if carved from the rock itself. "Overlord, this is Falcon. Overwatch set, 2 rifles up." Her voice carried flat across the radio. No inflection, no need for more. The reply crackled through. "Falcon, Overlord, copy." Convoy movement confirmed through narrow pass, ETA 20 minutes. She clicked once to acknowledge, never pulling her eye from the glass. 20 minutes meant everything. Time to calculate drift, to map the wind currents that swept across the valley in invisible rivers. She felt them on her skin, tiny eddies tugging at stray strands of hair beneath her helmet. Brooks cleared his throat. "You know what they said back at base. Just lucky, last time." She didn't answer. Luck was a word for gamblers and fools, not for someone who counted heartbeats between breaths, who memorized the rhythm of wind gusts, who measured time in the slow squeeze of a trigger. Through the scope, the valley came alive. A crow lifted from a boulder, black wings cutting the morning air. Shadows stretched thin. The pass remained empty, but tension hummed as steady as the pulse in her neck. She checked her dials again, adjusting for a crosswind that tugged at 1.7 meters per second. At this range, it would push the bullet more than a body's width off target. Then the radio cut in. "Falcon, Overlord, update. Convoy arrival ahead of schedule. Expect visual in 5. Brooks swore softly, fumbling with the rangefinder. "They're early. I'm reading 1900 meters. You're not dialed for this." "I'm dialed for everything," she murmured, steady as stone. Engines broke the silence first, low, distant, a mechanical growl carried by the cold air. Dark shapes rolled into view, silhouettes weaving through the pass. Armored trucks, scattered infantry, dust trailing in their wake. Brooks read again, urgency mounting. "Range 1,900 meters. Crosswind just spiked, 2.1 meters per second. We can wait. We should wait." She adjusted elevation. 32 MOA. Wind 1 full mil left. Her finger brushed the trigger guard, not pressing, only resting. The world narrowed. Valley, convoy, single figure leaning from the lead truck, scanning the ridges with binoculars. "Overlord, this is Falcon. Eyes on lead element. Range 1900 meters." The reply was curt. "Falcon, you do not have authorization to fire. Hold position." Brooks looked at her, panic flickering behind taped-up glasses. "Did you hear that? They said hold." But in the scope, she saw it. The fleeting window, the lean of the truck, the tilt of the figure's head into perfect alignment. It would vanish in seconds. By the time authorization came, the opportunity would be gone. Her breath slowed, stretched, became infinite. The wind flattened for a heartbeat. She felt the valley settle into silence, as if waiting with her. She exhaled, squeezed. The rifle bucked into her shoulder, recoil a sharp punch, muzzle blast rolling across the ridgeline. Brooks jerked, eyes wide, scrambling to follow through the glass. Time stretched, a thread pulled taut across the valley. Then, in the distance, the figure toppled from the truck, body snapping down like a cut marionette. Chaos erupted below, men shouting, vehicles halting, searchlights clawing up the ridges. Brooks let out a strangled laugh, half disbelief, half awe. 1900 meters, first shot. My God, Falcon pulled the bolt back, brass casing spinning free. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She simply settled the rifle back into position, eye pressed to the scope, ready for what came next. Overlord's voice cracked sharp. "Falcon, report. Did you engage?" She answered calmly, voice steady, as if she had done nothing more than breathe. Engaged. Effective. Silence filled the comms for a moment too long. Then, copy. Hold position. Brooks kept staring at her, chest heaving, disbelief written across his face. She adjusted her dials again, already recalculating, already preparing. For her, it was not luck, not chance, not miracle. It was simply the work. And in the silence that followed as the convoy scrambled in confusion below, Falcon knew the true test had not yet arrived. What waited in the valley would demand far more than luck. 3,400 meters, numbers no one believed belonged to reality. The valley stretched before them, a barren scar cut through the mountains, dust hanging in pale sheets above the convoy road. Falcon lay prone, her cheek pressed against the cold stock of her rifle, the glass of the scope showing the distant shapes still too small to trust. Dawn had hardened into harsh midday, shadows sharp, light unforgiving. Her breathing was steady, but inside she measured the distance with the weight of every shot she had ever taken. Corporal Devin Brooks hunched at her side, rangefinder pressed against his goggles, lips moving as he whispered figures. 3,400 meters. It's not even practical. He shook his head, scribbling calculations into his notepad. Elevation correction alone is plus 96 MOA. That's insane. You'll need nearly 4 stories of holdover. The math doesn't line up. Falcon didn't respond. The numbers were there, written in his voice, but her eyes stayed fixed downrange. Through the scope, the convoy crawled like ants across the valley floor. One vehicle, darker, heavier, shielded by escorts, moved with a deliberate pace. Command had already marked it as the carrier. Overlord, this is Falcon. Possible high-value element in convoy. Range 3,400 meters. The radio snapped back with certainty. Dismissive. Falcon. Overlord. Negative. Shot not feasible. Hold position. Brooks exhaled with relief. See? They know it's impossible. But Falcon kept the rifle steady, thumb brushing the safety. She listened to the wind around them, subtle changes in its pitch across the ridgeline. 2.3 meters per second, steady from the left. The figures on Brooks' page said no. The command said no. But the wind, the valley, her instinct, something in her bones whispered yes. Below, the convoy slipped into a pattern. Vehicles staggered their intervals, troops scanning outward, rifles up. A rhythm emerged, subtle, repeating. The target vehicle eased forward, then slowed, then forward again, like the beat of a drum carried across the valley. Falcon's eye tracked it, mind quieting until the numbers blurred and all that remained was timing, movement, inevitability. Brooks adjusted his glasses, panic in his voice. At this range, flight time is over 7 seconds. Any change, wind, speed, even heartbeat, throws it off. You'll miss by meters. She spoke finally, a whisper so calm it cut through his rising fear. Then I won't change. The radio cracked again, urgent this time. Falcon, Overlord. I repeat, hold fire. Target beyond capability. Abort. Falcon's finger eased to the trigger. Her chest expanded, long inhale, then slower exhale, a discipline so ingrained it carried the weight of ritual. She dialed elevation, +896 MOA. She dialed windage, 2 mils left. The scope swam with heat distortion, shimmering lines of light bending across the valley, but through it she saw the opening align. Vehicle's speed, crosswind lull, angle perfect for one breath. Brooks's voice rose to a frantic pitch. You can't take this shot, Elena. It's not math anymore. It's suicide. Please, wait for authorization. She didn't answer. She let the silence consume her. let his words fade until all she could hear was her own pulse slowing, slowing, slowing. The valley collapsed into a tunnel, only the crosshairs and the target existing. Her world became still. She squeezed. The rifle thundered, recoil jolting through her shoulder, bolt cycling in practiced rhythm. The round spun away, carving invisible arcs through the thin mountain air. 7 seconds stretched into eternity. Brooks counted under his breath, each number trembling. 1, 2, 3, 4. His voice broke at 5, gaze fixed through the spotting glass, searching for the impossible. Falcon remained motionless, cheek against the stock, eyes calm as if waiting not for luck but for gravity, wind, and time to obey her will. Down in the valley the convoy shifted. The lead vehicle slowed. The target car edged forward into the gap. Her crosshairs, though now empty, had already told her the truth. She had let the bullet go at the exact beat of that rhythm. Brooks gasped, breath catching in his throat. No way. His words fell apart, replaced by stunned silence. Falcon blinked once, slow and steady, then closed the bolt with finality. She did not look at him. She did not look away from the valley. Her breathing had already returned to its quiet pattern, as if nothing had happened at all. The radio flared again, command voices crowding the channel, urgency spilling through static. Falcon, Overlord, confirm shot. Repeat, did you engage? Falcon's voice was soft, level, carrying no triumph, no fear. Falcon engaged. Waiting, confirmation. The ridgeline held its breath. Even Brooks, once so frantic, fell silent, staring at her as though seeing her for the first time. Somewhere below, across the valley, the world was about to answer whether instinct could outlast calculation. And as the seconds stretched, Falcon knew the judgment of her shot would arrive not from her scope, but from the eyes in the sky. The feed lagged for 2 heartbeats, then the world caught up to her trigger. On the ridgeline, Falcon exhaled into the thinning afternoon air, her cheek still pressed to the worn stock of the rifle. The report of the shot lingered somewhere behind her, fading into the folds of the valley. Brooks hadn't said a word. His eyes flicked from the scope to the small monitor tethered to the satellite uplink. Waiting for confirmation, no one dared speak aloud. Across continents, voices collided in the command net. Overlord to all stations. Hold for visual. The tone carried strain, like someone clutching at disbelief. The seconds bled slowly, stretched thin by the weight of distance. Brooks muttered, almost to himself, 3,400. Can't be. His words dissolved into the silence that pressed in heavier than the mountain air. Then, on the screen, the feed jolted. A grainy silhouette staggered. Dust swirled, and the high-value target collapsed into the dirt. The command center erupted, a clamor of overlapping voices straining against static. Confirmation inbound. Target down. Say again. Target down. A new voice cut through, clipped and certain. Remote opes to Overlord. Target neutralized. Range 3,400 meters. Brooks sat back hard against the stone, as though the air had been knocked from him. He ripped his headset off, blinking rapidly, trying to reconcile numbers with reality. Falcon lowered the rifle with the same steady motion she had raised it, no tremor in her hands. The barrel glowed faintly, heat shimmering as it cooled, tiny crackles of expanding metal punctuating the hush. She didn't smile, didn't whisper triumph. She simply drew one long breath, as though she'd been holding it for a lifetime, and let it go. The mountains absorbed the sound, indifferent to human records or astonishment. On the net, awe replaced doubt. Overlord's voice steadied, though the undercurrent of wonder remained. Falcon, your shot is confirmed. Do you copy? She answered with the same calm cadence she always had. Falcon copies. Nothing more. Brooks turned toward her, his mouth working, eyes wide with a question he couldn't form. He had called her lucky before. They all had, but the number glowing at the bottom of the feed, 3,400 meters, burned away that word. In the command center, far from the valley, officers leaned closer to their screens, data overlays flickering, timestamps aligned, range calculations locked, wind drift accounted. The impossible was now logged, archived, and undeniable. For decades to come, analysts would argue whether it was skill, instinct, or something beyond either. But in this moment, in the thin air of the ridgeline, there was only Falcon and the quiet rhythm of her packing her kit. She eased the bolt closed, snapped the case shut, and began disassembling the position, each motion deliberate, unhurried. Brooks finally found his voice, ragged at the edges. "Do you realize what you just did?" Falcon glanced at him briefly, her expression unreadable, then returned to stowing the rifle. "I did my job." The sun had tilted westward, shadows lengthening across the valley floor where dust still hung over the convoy's halted remnants. The world shifted in those shadows, reverence replacing dismissal. Somewhere, men who had doubted her steadiness were speaking her name with new weight. The radio still crackled with clipped confirmations, reports cascading into secure channels. Range 3,400 meters. Kill confirmed. The words repeated, etched deeper each time they were spoken. Brooks closed his eyes, leaned back, and laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "Not luck," he whispered. Falcon zipped the case, slung it over her shoulder, and rose. The mountain winds tugged at her hair, carrying her silence like an answer the world had waited for. No celebration, no claim. Just the steady composure of someone who had seen doubt fall before her trigger. As they began their descent, the valley below still trembling from what had been done, the record had already been sealed. Falcon walked with the same measured stride she always had, leaving the world behind to argue, to remember, and to rewrite what they thought was possible. And in the silence that followed, the legend of Falcon began to form, not born from chance, but from the certainty of a single round crossing 3.5 kilometers to meet its mark. The world would call her many things after this day, but never again would they call her lucky.